Buenos dias, clase. So, um, Today we're going to be having a lesson on the differences between the preterite and the imperfect. I know that you have learned both of those tenses already. I also know that we've talked a little bit in the last couple of weeks about some trigger phrases, phrases that would trigger to the use of both the preterite and imperfect. So first we're going to start with a quick little review, and then we're going to talk about some rules, some general rules in which to know which one to use. So let's begin. All right, so the very first thing is that obviously the preterite has some regular endings. For AR verbs, we have aste, o, amos, astes, arron. Those are all endings for the AR verbs. So for example, the verb hablar is hablé, hablaste, hablo, hablamos, hablastes, hablaron. Remember that the preterite means it's the equivalent of ed in English. So that would be I talked, you talked, he talked, or if we use the word to speak, which happens to be irregular in English, it would be I spoke, you spoke, he spoke. The ER and IR verbs share endings. So the endings are iste, io, imos, istes, ieron. So an example is the verb vivir, to live. Vivi, I lived. To viviste, you lived. Vivió, vivimos, vivistes, vieron. Okay, those are the regular endings. There also are some irregular verbs. Dar and ver are actually very similar. You can see that how similar they are. Di, diste, dio, dimos, distes, dieron. Ver is basically the same with a V instead. Ser and ir are actually the identical words. Fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuistes, fueron. So in the preterite means I was, you were, he was, you were, or we were, you were, they were. But for ir, it means I went, you went, he went, we went, you went, they went. So the difference, of course, is context. It will not make sense to use the other word in English for each of those. So I think those are pretty easy to figure out, again, through your context clues. Also, if you remember, there are a couple of letters that have a spelling change depending on if there is a hard vowel or a soft vowel after them. C, G, and G both have that same unique quality in English as well as in Spanish. And also the letter Z does the same thing. And here's the thing, these are AR verbs. All of the endings are hard endings except for the yo. The yo has a soft vowel, so I've got to address that spelling. So I cannot have a C with an E after it without changing the sound. And since in the original infinitive, it's a K sound, K, I've got to keep that K sound. So it becomes K in the yo form. So yo busqué, tú buscaste, nosotros buscamos, vosotros buscasteis. You can see that it only changes in that yo form. Same thing with the letter G for GAR and the letter Z in like abrazar, almorzar, comenzar, empezar. Again, I've got to change that Z to a C to keep the correct pronunciation of that word. Let's move on. All right, and also if you remember that there are some very irregular stems in the preterite as well. Andar, estar, haber, hacer, poder, these all have irregular stems. Notice they all use the same ending, right? So for example, hacer, right, to make or to do. Yo hice, I made, I did. Tu hiciste, you made, you did. Él and ella hizo, I have a Z here. That Z changes because of the exact same reason, the opposite reason of what happened in the screen before. That Z and that C, I have a hard vowel now, so I've got to get that same S sound as here. So it becomes ISO, and that's why that Z is there. All right, let's keep moving forward. Also, don't forget that we do have stem changing verbs in the preterite, and only our IR stem changing verbs have a stem change in the preterite, and it's only in the L and ella form and the ellos and ellas and ustedes form here in the third person, both singular and plural. And sorry, so for like dormir, it would be dormí, dormiste, durmió. Dormimos, dormisteis, durmieron. And then also don't forget that we have a spell change in from the I's to Y's when I have that double vowel here. And for example, it becomes leo. That I changes to a Y. This is another spelling characteristic that we've got to pay attention to. And here, and basically, as we talked about before, if you have an unaccented I in between two vowels, it's going to have to change to a Y. They just would not, it doesn't look right for us in English, and it doesn't look right for those in Spanish as well. All right, moving on. And then now the imperfect. The imperfect, if you remember, is a very simple verb. It's really easy because I have regular endings, aba, abas, aba, abamos, abais, aban. So for example, hablar, hablaba, I used to speak. Hablabas, you used to speak. Hablaba, he or she used to speak. Hablabam, hablaba, sorry, that did mess that up. Hablábamos, hablabais, hablaban. And those are either I used to or I was doing. So I used to speak or I was speaking. ER and IR verbs, just like the preterite, have the same endings, right? They're not the same endings of the preterite, but they are the same as each other. ER and IR verbs share endings. So ia, ias, ia, íamos, iais, ian. So vivía, vivías, vivía. Again, I used to live or I was living. You used to live or you were living. And the nice thing about the imperfect is that all verbs are regular except for only three. These are the only three irregulars in all of the imperfect. Ir is iba, ibas, iba, ibamos, ibais, iban. So I was going or I used to go. You were going, you used to go. Ser, era, eras, era, éramos, erais, eran. I used to be or I was being, if you will. And then ver. And the only thing irregular about ver is I have to keep this E in there. Veía, veías, veía. Okay, so those are our only three irregulars. Now, here's the cool thing about the past tense. Both of these are past tenses. You have to understand when to use them. We've talked about the trigger phrases. We're going to review those real quickly. So how do we use that, the difference? How do we know the difference between the preterite and the imperfect? Again, both of these are past tenses. So preterite tense are going to use words like ayer, anoche, la semana pasada, el año pasado, el viernes pasado, a las 5, specific time. I can have any time here, a la una, a las dos, a las tres. And these, again, trigger something that happened in the past and it's done. It's finished. So, so ayer Manuel fue a la oficina. Yesterday, Manuel went to the office. Done. Anoche yo llamé a mi novio. Last night, I called my boyfriend. El viernes pasado, and I can have any day of the week here. I can have the word año. I can have the word mes. This in particular says last Friday. I could say last week, last year, last month, last January. I could put any of those time expressions in here. So el viernes pasado comimos en Subway. Last Friday we ate at Subway. A las 6 salimos de la casa. At 6 o'clock we left at the house. We know exactly what time something happened. So again, any specific time that I would write here. Again, the verb is going to be used in the imperfect because I know exactly when it happened. All right, the imperfect tense uses words like a menudo, often, a veces, sometimes, todos los días, every day, de vez en cuando, once in a while, con frecuencia, frequently. These are all, and siempre, these are all words that imply something that has happened over and over again. It's a habit, it's habitual. It is repetitive. It has repeated many times, or we don't know how many times it's repeated, but we know that it's happened more than once, or that it's not over and finished with, or it wasn't in the past. So, muchas veces, many times, all imply again that repeated action. Siempre leía antes de acostarme. I always used to read before I going to bed. Again, it's something that happened often. I don't know how many times. Sandra me llamaba a veces. Sandra called me sometimes. Juanito jugaba al béisbol muchas veces. Juanito played or used to play baseball a lot, many times. Again, I don't know how often it happened. I know that it happened repeatedly. That's the imperfect. All right, so let's practice. So let's decide, would this be the preterite or the imperfect? So number one, he read a book yesterday. Does that imply that it happened a specific number of times? Does it imply that it happened over and over again? Well, the word yesterday is that trigger that says, oh no, it was a one-time thing. So that is definitely the preterite. Number two, we talked on the phone every Saturday. So is that implying an over and done with once or a specific number of times? Or is that implying it happened over and over again? And I don't know exactly how many times it happened. So that every Saturday, yes, you know what happened on Saturdays, but you don't know how many times it happened. It just was something that it was a habit. So therefore, it's going to be the imperfect. He always set the table. The word always is siempre, right? The opposite would be nunca, never. Again, do I know exactly how many times it happened? Nope. So it will be the imperfect. I called her last night. Again, last night being anoche, that's going to be your trigger word. Is that an over and done with a specific number of times, or is it a repeated habitual action? We know that as a specific action, so therefore it will be the preterite. She slept late every day. What do you think, preterite or imperfect? Your every day is going to be your clue. Of course, that is the imperfect because it happened repeatedly. He slept late yesterday. Is that preterite or imperfect? Yesterday being the key phrase. This seems like it's a specific number of times. It happened yesterday, one time, one action. We ate at Pizza Hut sometimes. What is that? Again, sometimes, here's your clue. That's going to be the imperfect because we don't know how often it happened. We know it happened more than once and it happened repeatedly. And we don't know exactly how many times. And then she played with me on Sundays. Now, even though the word played here, that ed, it implies the preterite, but that's just a translational thing. Here, it's on Sundays. I don't know how often it happened. It was a habit, though, so therefore it will be the imperfect. So hopefully that helps you kind of understand a little bit the differences there. So let's now talk about some of the rules that you need to know or understand about the preterite. The preterite is used for actions that have happened a specific number of times, even once. It could have happened 10 times or 12 times, but I know exactly how many times it happened. It's a very specific number of times or number of events. For actions that interrupt, so if I'm interrupting something, that interruption is the preterite. So for example, I was sleeping when someone knocked at the door. Boom, knock at the door, that would be an interruption of my sleep. So anything that interrupts, the interruption is going to be the preterite. For actions that happen for a specific length or duration of time. So I studied for 3 hours. I know exactly how long it happened. That's going to be the preterite. And then for action-oriented events, again, it's a very specific action or it could be a series of actions. So for example, yo hablé is usually translated, that's the preterite, I spoke. It can also be I did speak. Normally, words that are associated with the preterite, again, some of those trigger phrases, ayer, anoche, una vez, or again, it could be 2 or 3 times. I can have a different specific number there. Una vez, dos veces, tres veces. El año pasado, hace 2 días, it was 2 days ago. So those are all things that can trigger that preterite. All right, so let's look at some examples, and here are those rules listed again. Mi madre vivió en México por 3 años. So, por 3 años, for 3 years, my mother lived in Mexico. So which one of these would be, do you think it would be the right reason? Well, you know that por 3 años is a time frame. So I've got 2 here that have time. Is it for a specific length or is it a specific number of times? So because it says for 3 years, we are talking about a duration of time or a length of time. So that is going to be rule C for number 1. What about for number 2? Los chicos corrían cuando hubo un accidente. So los chicos corrían, that is the imperfect. They were running. It was something happening. It was happening when? Boom. there was an accident. That there was an accident interrupted the running, right? So that is going to be letter B. That is that interruption.